Yeah. So, yeah.
Good evening. Calling the meeting to order. Welcome to the West Hartford Public Schools Board of Education regular meeting on this Tuesday, November the 1st, 2022. Let's begin with the roll call. Thank you so much, Charlotte.
Dr. Chang.
Here.
Mr. Goldman.
Here.
Dr. Harris.
Here.
Ms. Nazarella.
Present.
Ms. Poland.
Here.
Dr. Steinberg.
Here.
Ms. Thomas Farquharson.
Here.
Student Representative Megan Murphy.
Here.
Student Representative Caitlin Striffcave.
Here.
Thank you so much. Caitlin, may you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. We do not have a revision to the agenda order, and now is the time for public communications. This is where we're able to hear from you, your thoughts, your concerns, your suggestions. Each individual has 3 minutes to speak, and we have 21 minutes per subject matter. When you are at the podium, please be aware of Charlotte, who will hold up a yellow card when you have 1 minute remaining in your time, and a red card means your time has expired, and if you can please respectfully take your seat. Please know that we are attentively listening to what you are saying, although we do not respond to comments as they are being made. Have a list here, and we'll go down that list, starting with Mark Walsh. And when you're at the podium, can you please share your name, which I just did, but your address as well? Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Walsh, 33 Huckleberry Lane. I've been here a couple times, my third time. So I told you, well, it was 72 days ago where I heard a caller on talk radio that made a statement that we had a student commit suicide at Bristow Middle School. So I immediately started making phone calls and gathered information, and also asked for a police report, which took a while. So the things I know is that that was true. On December 1st, a student harmed themselves. They were left alone in the bathroom for 11 minutes and 29 seconds. And by that time, they found her. She was in dire need of medical care, and she died some days later. I received the police report where, social media, Snapchat, TikTok was utilized to encourage other students to anything from commit suicide. I saw the N-word used, lots of bullying. I don't know if race was involved in the bullying that went on there. But anyway, I did find out that the most disturbing thing for me was to hear that a social worker at the Children's Hospital in Hartford contacted West Hartford Police because she was receiving phone calls from other social workers that this might have been a suicide pact. That was disturbing for me. So, this is what I know, and it's time to move forward. It's kind of funny. In the process, I received a lot of labels, from being a lunatic to conspiracy theorist. I'm a troublemaker. And the one I like the best, that I guess I'll own it, is I'm combative. But here's the thing is, when I moved into town, I didn't sign up and say, I'm going to fight for my neighbors and my students that go to school. My kids don't even go there anymore. It's all you officials, all the elected officials appointed. Well, I hear time and time again, you guys are going to fight for me, you're going to fight for them, you're going to fight for the kids, you're going to fight for everything. And I don't see anybody wearing the gloves but me. So, it's time to step up. I don't know what you signed up for. I know there's motions you can make, but don't have me stand up here by myself with this. So anyway, I need two components to help me to move forward. I got a vision of maybe having forums and everything else. Two components that need to help me the most are government and the media. Now, here's the bad part. Guess who's working against me the most? The government and the media. I can't get one town official to work with me. The local media called this a medical issue and left it alone. I got a text from a current reporter today that said she spoke with West Hartford officials and community members. I asked her to forward those names and numbers so I could get the information they did. So I don't even know how to move forward at this point without the help of somebody else. Do I go ahead and volunteer all by myself to secure the auditorium, to find specialists to come in to talk? This is a crisis in our community. I want to tell you, there's 169 towns in Connecticut. How many other town what other town do you think had a
Excuse me, your
suicide
time
in
has
their
expired.
school?
Excuse me.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll be back.
Thank you. Next, we have Anita.
Hi, my name is Anita Rakelian, and I live at 48 West Normandy Drive. For 7 days, I washed my hands and I went to the bedside. For 7 days, I thought I was very intelligent until the day Dr. Marilyn Sanders came and stood on the other side of the bed, and she looked at me and she said, if I do resuscitation on Sevon and his rib breaks, he will die of pain. It will go into his spleen. And on that day, I looked at Dr. Sanders and I gave the partial DNR order. Dr. Sanders did not compromise. You are now being asked to compromise for policy 8355. Don't compromise. Gail Harris, you know doctors don't compromise. Claire Nessarella, my son was removed from the classroom. Would you remove a child who's quietly taking an exam because the principal said so? Or would you question it? And you, Deb Paloon, you talk about advocacy. It's time to advocate for these kids. Ari Steinberg, would you allow your child to be removed without just cause? Ethan Goldman, you graced the halls before I did. Steinberg Dietrich, you know what it takes to get a 3.8 or a 4.0. You know what it is to substantiate expenditures, and purchase orders and invoices do not show flow of funds. Dr. Harris, you know doctors don't compromise. My father was a physician, and I have a lot of surgeons in my family. I also have prosecutors, and I have attorneys. They don't compromise. They do the best. I have sent emails, and I have asked that you do a probe into the office of the superintendent. They don't have records. When a parent goes and talks to the superintendent and gives the problem, you expect the superintendent at minimum to do a probe and to report a finding. Well, I have done with him, because of him, I went to the Office of Civil Rights. He gave me a one sentence at that time. Office of Civil Rights gave 10 pages, and I guarantee you, and I stand here on solid ground, 2 teachers and a principal gave false statements to a federal agency. I am now asking for a probe of the Office of the Superintendent, because what's going on in the classrooms, these students have to learn, because when a doctor comes and says, this is the situation, we need that partial DNR, I don't want to do resuscitation and have your child die in pain. That was a lot of courage for Dr. Sanders at CCMC. So please don't compromise. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Addie.
Ashley Lorden, 561 Park Road. I'd first like to thank Mr. Paul Vicinis, Assistant Superintendent. I sent an email, and Mr. Vicinis, you not only acknowledged, but you did answer my email, and I'm looking forward to the answers to my follow-up questions. I thank you very much for restoring my faith, a little bit anyway. This 8355, first of all, I want to point out that on the back page, it states, no more than 10 persons shall be permitted to comment during the public comment period at the beginning of the meeting. Then it goes on to say a maximum of 7 persons shall be allowed to comment on each subject matter. However, in the minutes from that meeting, it says that there are 7 persons allowed to speak per topic, 21 minutes per subject, agenda or no. Limit is for both sessions. So is it 10 or is it 7? That's one question. Also, we have over 7,000 students and we have about 65,000 residents. And you're limiting 7 people to speak on subjects. That seems a little crazy when you think that we might have more serious issues coming up that need discussing. So, also, Dr. Farquharson, you finally answered one of my emails. Thank you. You said that the agenda for subcommittee meeting on October 12th was posted on the 7th of October. It was not. You said that the meeting itself, the time and place, was posted 48 hours beforehand on WHBS. It was not. You did not answer my follow-up questions as to why Dr. Chang was allowed to call in for that meeting and the public weren't given any phone numbers. You also did not answer why, after people were made aware that there were members of the public who wanted to join that meeting, I was not allowed into that meeting virtually on these premises until I went to Corporation Council. You answered none of that. None of these issues were mentioned in the minutes for October 12th. October 18th, minutes are not present on the website. This is not per your policy and procedure, and you have cited that you follow Robert's rules. Minutes should be done in a timely manner, 7 days, 3 days if there's a vote. There are no minutes for that meeting, and there were several serious topics discussed that night. You can choose to ignore them, or you can choose to address them, but put the minutes up so the public know. On October 25th, the agenda was not up and the meeting barely was put up within 24 hours. I wrote an email stating I wanted my issues, my comments read out and recorded, as I could not make that meeting. I could not arrange babysitting because there was less than 24 hours. In the meeting minutes, it says,
Excuse me, your time has expired.
follow your policies. They're pretty good instead of making up more.
Thank you. Next, we have John Lyons.
I've never done this before. Is it on, or do I need to push a button?
It is on.
I'm
You're
good.
all
Okay,
set.
thank you, thank you. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members, for permitting me to speak today. I want to publicly today recognize former Board of Education Chair and outgoing Board of Ed member, Deb Poland. Deb joined the Board of Education at a very challenging time for the board. She took over the chair position when Carol Blanks was elected to the town council and has provided a steady, transparent, and balanced approach to governing the Board of Ed. No one expected publications that knew nothing about West Hartford to start publishing speculative and divisive stories about West Hartford and our school system, and no one expected COVID-19 and all the complicated challenges it brought to our school system. Deb never lost focus, worked closely with her colleagues, town council, and superintendent of schools to make some very difficult decisions early on and craft policy that no previous Board of Education in West Hartford could ever have conceived of. She did this all while listening to the community and carefully considering their concerns. As I'm sure most here know tonight, this will be Deb's last Board of Ed meeting. She'll be moving on to become a town councilor, and the new Board of Ed member search will begin promptly. I want to thank Deb personally and publicly on the record for all she's given to our community serving on the Board of Education, and wish her the best in her new role on town council. Finally, I hope the Board of Education can bring someone in to replace her that has her sense of fairness, strength of character, and courage. We will all be better for it, and I'm happy to help in any way I can. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Matt.
I forgot my address. I apologize.
Oh, please do. Thank you. Thank you for following the
Ronnie
rules.
saved me on that one. So,
Teamwork.
John Lyons, 21 Chestnut Hill Road, West Hartford.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you. Now we will have Matt.
Good evening, Matt Masunas, 62 Grove Street, West Hartford. I'm humbled, first of all, speaking after testimony of such personal gravity to people. Something that's important to me is to advocate for electric and alternative fueled school buses. I'm here because our children deserve to breathe clean air, and it's a way to improve public health that also helps address the climate crisis, something that the West Hartford Town Council just earlier this year in this room officially recognized on a bipartisan basis as needing addressing. So how do we begin the process of integrating in into the town's contracted bus fleet buses that run on fuels other than diesel. Well, ideally these will be zero emissions electric drivetrains. As the vendors who will bid on the transportation contract know, there are new billions of dollars, another billions of dollars, $1 billion from the EPA just last week was released, but billions of dollars coming out at the federal level in grants available to help vendors provide you, the Board of Education, with attractively priced alternatives to diesel buses for when you go out to bid in 2023. What I respectfully encourage the board to do is to solicit input to help you craft the right RFP provisions for when this goes out to elicit the sort of result that you might be seeking. As one example, several years ago, Fairfield schools provided for innovation proposals geared toward soliciting at least one electric school bus into its fleet. And since then, with the state's passage of Public Act 22-25, you have at least one zero emissions bus in the transportation contract. Well, then that gives you greater flexibility in how long you can run that contract as a whole. So the underlying playing field has since changed there too. Respectfully, again, my suggestion would be to check first others for the existence of model language to make it easy on yourselves. It was something I was pushing several groups earlier this year to develop, including, hopefully it exists by this point. That would include COSTA, the School Transport Association, the Association of School Business Offices, CASBO, Connecticut DEP, with ideas on contract language that can go beyond business as usual. The board is then positioned to take one of these rare contract renewal opportunities to begin the work of transitioning the fleets, something that is important and is actually now a state mandate between now and 2040. So with a limited number of bites at that apple, it may make sense to pre-position for that. So I know only because I saw an email earlier today, there is a website, electricschoolbusinitiative.org. There is a nonprofit World Resources Institute that offers office hours and one-on-ones with school districts to provide guidance and kind of a sense of what peers are doing for comps. That's my time. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here who would like to make a comment? Please approach the podium, share your name and address, please.
Cindy Gauthier, 44 Manchester Circle. Never planned to speak at these things, but somehow I end up here. So this is off the cuff. I started coming to these meetings last year because I got sick of fighting with the school to get my daughter the rights that she deserved and the proper education. Actually coming here got me a lot of attention, which was my goal. And it got her an alternate placement. Not ideal, but she's thriving. It broke my heart that she had to leave her home school, though, because she is a senior this year. But I have to take the lesser of two evils, so she's getting a better education where she's at. My concern is how many more of her are there going to be in this town that don't get the services that they deserve. I'm not just fighting for my own child. I'm fighting for every kid that deserves an education. And it troubles me that we can all come here and complain about the issues that we feel are important to us. The kids commit suicide in school. I am stunned that those kind of things are getting swept under the carpet, apparently, because I had no idea that occurred. And I find that very troubling. And my question to the board is, I get that you can't respond to us, but where do we go to get a resolution to these things? I can come up here and complain every month, and it's not going to change anything. So what is our next course of action? What do we have to do to get a response out of you? If somebody could please help me out there, because I just think this is a waste of time for everyone to keep coming and griping and getting no resolution. There's no point in being your side and our side like we're enemies. We all are part of this town, and we should all work together to do what's best for all of our kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments that those here would like to make? I'll ask one more time. Okay, we will pause on public communications. Now we will move to non-staff communications and reports, and this is where we enjoy hearing from our student representatives. So good to see you both, and we'll begin with Megan reporting on Hall.
Good evening, everyone. So at Conard recently...
I apologize, Conard, excuse me, thank you.
We've had some exciting sports achievements. Recently, the boys golf team won the Central Connecticut Conference Tournament with a score of 307, which was super exciting. And as fall seasons wrap up, a lot of teams are heading into the state tournaments, actually almost all of our teams, so that's very exciting as well. Outside of sports, last week the Equity Squad met here at the Town Hall for leadership training. Mr. Vecinos was there to answer questions, and conversations were held with a couple other faculty members from both Hall and Conard as well. And it was great to discuss some equity improvements in our district. On October 26th, the students attended the Men of Color and Leadership Conference held by CAS and CIAC at Berlin High School. And at this event, there were 2 panels. Each had 5 panelists, and one of them was actually our principal, Principal Hines. And all of them talked about their journey to individual leadership and their types of leadership. And about 300 to 350 young men in color got to attend this exciting event. And it was great to hear from speakers from all over the state, including our principal, and it was even broadcasted on Channel 3. The last trip that happened was Accounting 1 and 2 students went to the Accounting as My Major conference at University of Hartford, where they received a tour and also a panel discussion, which was great to explore their interests. We had a new Leader of the Pack awards announced recently for this past month, and it's exciting to give a new meaning to our new mascot. Concerts were held for all 3, choir, band, and orchestra, and they were all beautiful performances. And last week we had a Spirit Week ending with a fun dress up for Halloween, and it was fun to see both teachers and students participating.
Thank you, Megan, sharing on Conard. Now we'll hear from Caitlin sharing on Hall.
Right, red is on. Hi, everyone. I'm Caitlin. I'm the Hall representative, obviously. I'm sorry I couldn't come 2 weeks ago. I did have my Hall senior night, and I just wanted to apologize.
May I respectfully disagree with you? Please do not apologize. You are a student, and that was a special occasion, so you did well.
Well, Amira had a wonderful time here, I believe, and she was raving about it when she was telling me when we came back. So, anyway, so this week we had our blood drive for the Red Cross. We had a record-breaking 30 pints, which was wonderful. I did not give blood. I was a little scared, but I did volunteer, which was great. We also had our Disney Dazzle concert on Saturday. It was raising money for the Disney trip for the band kids, and that was a lot of fun. I sang When Will My Life Begin from Tangled, which was great. There was also on the same day, there was the first robotics competition in New England this year for it was hosted at Hall. There was like 300 people there, or 300 teams. It was a lot of, I had no idea. It was very cool. One of our teams finished in the Sweet 16, which was really cool also. But that was one of the many things happened on Saturday. Another thing was the freshman field hockey did their annual Halloween jamboree. There's like 7 teams that come, so it was a very busy day. Comedy of Errors had their performances this past weekend. It was really fun to see everyone. I don't know, it was the first Black Box performance of the year, and it was just a great thing going on. Lucas Almeida scored his 96th goal of the season. I'm sure you guys have seen it. He beat the record that was in 1981 with Yuri Fishman by 1 goal, obviously, and Yuri came to the game and they took a picture. It was very sweet. Boys cross country won yet another state championship, which is just like the coolest thing ever. They just, every single year. Homecoming wrapped up last week on Saturday, our Spirit Week, and so we had a bunch of really fun things going on. A lot of I think it was Adam Sandler Day. There was Pink Out. It was really cool. There was also field hockey. One more thing. I know I'm biased. I have to mention it, but field hockey had our Play for the Cure game, and we did raise $500 for the Dana-Farber Foundation, which was really exciting. And the pep rally that also came after homecoming was fun. It was the first one we've had it since freshman year, so that was really awesome and a fun way to bring the school together. We played a couple of games in the middle of the gym. I'm a little sorely, I'm sad that I lost my game in front of the whole school. I'm definitely very disappointed about it, and I'll have to bring it back next time. It was disappointing. And yeah, November 1st, big deadline for a lot of people for colleges, so just getting through the night, and then we'll be on our way. So thank you so much. That was my update.
Thank you, Caitlin, and thank you, Megan. And just want to share with both of you, of course, if at any point in time during the meeting you need to depart early, we give you our blessing, and please do attend to your studies. So thank you so much. Now moving on to unfinished business, where we are looking at a motion by Dr. Lorna Thomas Farquharson, Dr. Gail Harris, and Dr. Jason Chang to accept revised policy 8355 as a second reading. So thank you so much, Ann McKernan, for coming to the table. And we'll have our policy subcommittee to begin by reintroducing this. And again, our policy subcommittee is made up by Dr. Gil Harris, thank you so much, and Dr. Jason Chang, and myself. And so I'll pass it off to Dr. Chang, please.
Great. All right. Thank you. Before I kind of launch into a kind of summary of where we've come from and where we are, how we got to our second reading and vote for this policy, I want to thank the legal counsel for their tireless work in making revisions and addressing all of our concerns and helping us to think through the best possible language. I want to thank the board, my fellow colleagues on the subcommittee. It's been lovely to work with you and to try to serve the public. And also the board members who've helped to tailor this policy and the feedback that we've received. And then also, of course, the district. And you have done a lot of work to support the revision of this policy, and want to give you recognition for the tireless work you've put in towards this. So the policy subcommittee has unanimously approved the advancement of a second reading of this policy. So the policy revision process has led to some confusion. So I'll review some of the changes that we've made along the way and some statements for clarification. So the first change that we made to this policy was a compromise, a timed window for public comment at the beginning of the meeting, right? And with an express prioritization of comments germane to agenda items. The second change that we made to this policy was a conversion of existing time limitations to number of speakers. And this is in practice how the policy lives today. And so why not write that practice into the policy? So it's the policy subcommittee's exclusive charge to evaluate, revise, and propose policy changes. And I'm proud of our bipartisan collaboration on this important vote before us. The subcommittee has gone through significant deliberation on this policy, holding fast to three principles of freedom of speech, facilitating public dialogue, and conducting board business. So freedom of speech is, of course, the legal and moral foundation of our society. Conducting board business is our constitutional obligation for public education. Facilitating dialogue is a core value of West Hartford Public Schools, not required by any statute or bylaw. So, some questions have come up about this policy. Is it necessary? Yes, it is necessary. How do we know it's necessary? We know it's necessary because we understand that public comment has increased over time. The minimum from 2019 to 2020, the minimum number of speakers was 19 speakers. On the average, the four-year average from 2017 to 2021 was 37 speakers. And last year, the maximum number was 154 speakers. Right? So in order to honor the time of the audience, especially members who wish to speak on agenda items, this policy gives them preference, gives them priority. And the timed window allows us to then get to our business. Right? It's also been suggested that maybe we're rushing into this. we're not rushing into this. How do we know we're not rushing into it? We know because we've had 2 significant policy revisions. And with open board dialogue, with questions from and to the to legal counsel. In addition, we've had numerous subcommittee meetings. And in fact, the rules about subcommittee meetings and holding first and second readings is designed to prevent any kind of rushed policy. So thanks to our bylaws, rushing is not possible. Does this stifle public comment? That's a concern. No. How do we know this doesn't stifle public comment? We know it doesn't stifle public comment because West Hartford Board of Education comment policy is currently and will remain so should we revise 8355, the most generous public comment policy among 25 other surrounding school districts, permitting a total of 6 minutes per individual. Now with guaranteed priority at the beginning of meetings on comments germane to the agenda with normal constraints on the number of comments per subject matter. And perhaps most telling, I think, is an indication of how this policy does not stifle public comment is the fact that public comment at every prior meeting this year would have transpired nearly identical to how it would have occurred under the revised policy. So this is a needed policy pursued with transparency that preserves the public's voice, that facilitates efficient proceeding of board business. So we know this information because it has been researched using public data available to everyone who has an interest in discovering the reality of public comment history and practice here in the district. So thanks to many questions from the board, many advances to understand the dimensions of this policy, we've taken a lot of staff hours in conducting research and understanding how this policy is both necessary and the policy process has been transparent. And we go through this process because we value consensus making, right? And addressing concerns, skepticism, doubt is all a part of the process of crafting a good, strong policy. So it's with this understanding that I hope we can proceed with a vote that brings everyone's concerns to the table. And my hope is that we have a unanimous vote to support the passage of this bill for the time expenditure put into understanding every dimension of it and the transparency that we've had in pursuing this. Happy to answer any questions, or Gail, if you want to add anything too.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. I think I more or less stated my feelings on this last time. I think that the policy is a compromise, and I think compromise is a good thing. I'm not opposed to compromise. There are times in life when you compromise, and I think that in general, one of the things that's missing in our public life today is that nobody's really willing to compromise. People are stand in their corners, and that's why I think we, to some degree, see what's going on in our country, because nobody is willing to make any compromises. I think, like Jason said, I think that this, is not I don't think it's a perfect policy, but I do think that it allows for some public comment. Nobody's being limited to speak. Nobody's being limited to say anything. But it also takes into account the fact that we are trying to run a business meeting here, and we do have people waiting to speak, and we need to be mindful of that as well. So after looking at this, like Jason said, for many hours and having much information given to us, I believe that it is a fair compromise, and I will support it.
Thank you. Before we go into more discussion, I'm just going to have us to formally introduce it with a motion and a second. So seeking a motion that the Board of Education accept as a second reading revised policy 8355, which was reviewed by the Board Policy Subcommittee. Again, this is just accepting it as a second reading. We're not taking the vote right now on the policy. But is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you so much, Jason and Gail. Now, discussion. Ethan?
I guess I'll go. I'm against the proposed change, and while I acknowledge that improvements could be made to the open communication period, I believe it would have been more appropriate to look at making more moderate changes, and more time should have been spent to look at different options, and to even test out the different suggestions to see if the changes would work in the way that they're intended. Several points I'd like to make, and I know I said it last time, but I'll say it again. Perception can be reality, and while I don't believe there's any intent of this change to suppress different points of view, I think, given what happened the last year, that's what's going to be the perception of many. And you heard it tonight from two people. Whether true or not, perception is reality. And there have been multiple, not all comments are created equal. I admit that. Some, aren't that great, but there's been some that have helped me as a board member understand things. And the one that immediately comes to mind, because it was totally something I was unaware of, was the whole issue of the softball fields. And that came up. It got visibility, and I was able to, when the capital plans were presented, go back to Ann and say what happened to those, because it didn't come up. The work had been done, but it didn't come up. But it's important we're aware of what's going on. I know emails are there, but they're not always effective. Another would be the team mascot discussion. Well, that was painful in certain ways. I got a lot better sensitivity for both sides. Different things that I hadn't thought of on both sides, and had a better feeling for why each side had a different point of view. And I think it's healthy. Yes, there were emails, but it's not the same thing as having people express themselves. New England has a strong history from colonial and revolutionary times of allowing residents to speak freely at public meetings. It's an important heritage that we should maintain. I know you're trying to do that, but to put limitations just strikes me the wrong way. While I understand the intent to limit the public communication period, I'm generally confused as to what is considered excessive and what is acceptable. And I would point out tonight we had 6 speakers. 2 weeks ago we had 7. I didn't bring from September, but I don't think it was that many. Based on, the average time for the prior years was less than 10 minutes. The new rules, as I calculated, and I could have got this wrong, is 21 minutes if it's 7 speakers, or it's 30 minutes. We're not going that far up. If you average what happened last year, I calculated for 16 meetings, we should have been about just under 30 minutes on average. And I realize average is not what always happens, but we weren't that far out. I would have liked to see some alternatives to consider. We are unusual in having 2 school boards. We learned from Ann's research. Why not have one meeting where your changes go in of the agenda items, and the other meeting that's open-ended so people feel like they can come and talk? If there's too many speakers, maybe we limit speakers to once a month. I just think there's easier ways to do this than the way we're going. And then finally, I think I would have liked to have seen, and maybe for future, and I may regret this, but we don't really have a policy or process for the back end. So when somebody brings something up, and I'll use the softball as example, we don't really go back to them and say, yeah, we heard you, or whatever. I realize that's tricky, and I realize some answers you don't have, but I think that's something I would like to have seen addressed. And then, and I mentioned this before to Andy, and we need to have more of and this is just in general, when things happen and we need to make improvements, we have some kind of after action, so we go back and share the information of what we could have done better, or what happened. I realize it doesn't happen that often, but there are times. So anyways, I'd still like to request that we wait on the changes and look for more moderate changes, but that's me. So anyways, unfortunately, I can't agree on the consensus, so sorry.
All right, Ethan. Thank you. Other comments or thoughts? right, well, hearing none, I'll ask one last time. Okay, we will now move to vote on the revised second reading of policy 8355. And so, let us do this by roll call, if we may, Charlotte, please. Thank you.
Dr. Chang,
Yes?
Mr. Goldman,
No.
Dr. Harris,
Yes.
Ms. Nezzarella,
Yes.
Ms. Poland,
Yes.
Dr. Steinberg,
Yes.
Dr. Thomas Farquharson.
Yes. And the yeses and the ayes have it, so the motion passes. Thank you. Now moving on to several other second readings. Again, a motion by Dr. Lorna Thomas Farquharson, Dr. Gail Harris, Dr. Jason Chang to accept revised policies as a second reading. Specifically, Policy 6212, Parent-Teacher Communication, 6291, Parent and Family Engagement Policy for Title I students, 6330, Homework, 6421, Parental Access to Instructional Materials, and student series policies reflected in Policy 5110, Confidentiality and Access to Education Records, 5130, Transportation, 5147, Students, and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. 5635, Physical Activity under Directed Play and Student Discipline. Undirected play, play and student discipline. 5690, Suicide Prevention and Intervention. And 5691, Title IX of the Education Amendment of 1972, Prohibition of Sex Discrimination and Sexual Harassment. So again, we received all of these last time as a first reading. This is the second reading. As was shared with us by Ms. McKernan and by our attorney, these are state mandates, federal mandates. So although we certainly will introduce a motion and a second and have discussion, we certainly do want to be law-abiding members of this Board of Education. So before we go into discussion, seeking a motion that the Board of Education accept as a second reading the following policies which were revised by the Board Policy Subcommittee. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Jason. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Gail. Discussion.
These are the same as before, and they're all per the state.
Correct.
Okay, I just,
Either federal or state statute.
that's what I assumed. Okay, thank you.
Any discussion? All right, let us vote. And all of those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you so very much. Now we will move on to new business. We have a motion by Dr. Lorna Thomas Farquharson, Dr. Gail Harris, and Dr. Jason Chang to accept revised policies for first reading. And this is in regard to Policy 5521, Drug and Alcohol Use by Students, 5310, Student Attendance Truancy and Chronic Absenteeism, 5610, Administration of Medication in the Schools, 5680, Child Sexual Abuse and Assault Response Policy and Reporting Procedures. And in regard to Personnel Series 4000, we have Policy 4011, Prohibition of Sex Discrimination and Sexual Harassment in the Workplace. And then with respect to personnel, 4250, Prohibition on the Recommendation for Psychotropic Drugs. And Ms. McKernan, may I pass it to you or to the team here? We know that we have our booklet right here where all of the policies have been inserted. We have quite a thick book. And so again, this too falls under the umbrella of complying with state and federal mandates. But certainly, we want to allow for discussion if need be. So first, we'll seek a motion to accept the policies that were noted just a few moments ago. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Jason. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Gail. Discussion.
So,
Yes, Gail.
yeah, this is maybe just a point of order. I am a little bit confused with this whole idea that these are sort of mandated, but then we're being asked to vote on them. Because there are some things that I actually had brought up. I think I sent an email about some of the issues in some of these policies that are difficult for me to entirely support. So it seems a little bit hard for me to understand if these are state mandated, then why ask for our vote? And I don't know if anybody knows the answer to that, but
I can give you a little bit of the history of that, Gail.
Okay.
So we adopted the shipment policy book in 2020, I believe, March of 2020, right when the pandemic first hit. And it had been an ongoing project that I had been working on with Jess Ritter to really make sure that the district is always in legal compliance, because one of the foundations that we have is the Board of Education policies. They govern, from a legal standpoint, how we're operating. And so we adopted the book en masse at once, which is very typical, as I believe Jessica Ritter explained last time. 80 out of 100 and some odd districts in the state use the shipment book. It's they literally, Tom Mooney, who you've met, literally has written the book on Connecticut educational law. It's Mooney's Guide to Educational Law. But regardless, there's their model policies are always in compliance. And then as they change their policies to deal with both federal and state changes in statute, they update their policy book. In the past, we've simply gone ahead and adopted en masse, just to stay in compliance, because you don't have the legal authority to change any of this, really. And so it's an interesting question as to why we're going through and doing one reading and two reading and voting on something that really is a foundation piece that you don't really have any authority to change. On that, I would defer to you guys, because it's your decision and your policy committee on that. It's not our decision on that. We're fine either way with it. The ultimate end result, though, is that we have an adopted current policies that govern the operations of the district.
Claire and then Deb.
I'm curious. Sorry. So if we didn't adopt and follow these, we can add to them and go further, but am I right? If we don't adopt them and there's a legal challenge, we wouldn't be following the state?
Well, yes, but I think Gail's question wasn't about not adopting them and not following them. It's going through all of this with not having really any leeway. Am I understanding that correctly?
I mean, in this particular group that we're talking about now, there are some, medical type things in here that I find somewhat difficult.
Okay.
And I don't know if I would say some of these policies are the best policy. So then it becomes hard for me, as maybe looking at this from a medical point of view, to sort of support some of this. And then I keep thinking, well, but this is mandated anyway, so why am I being forced to vote on it anyways?
Well, I mean, again, this is the legal interpretation of the Connecticut or the federal statute for that. And so, if the question is, do you guys have to go through two readings to adopt all of this? I would argue, based on past precedent, you don't. And you could simply say these are the changes that have been made to the policy book. We adopt in one go all of these changes. But can you operate without adopting them in any way, shape, or form? No. You have to go ahead and be in compliance. And so this is a compliance task.
But again, these are developed from the Department of Education and the legal and
No, these are developed as through the federal or the state statute.
following state law.
Correct.
Okay, that's
Yes.
what I meant.
Yeah, but not the Department of
So they're following
Education.
the Connecticut
It's-
state law.
It's following the state law that's designed by the legislature.
Right.
Or the changes that have occurred in the federal statutes that then roll down to and influence the state statutes as well.
I want to say, pardon me, Ethan. Ethan? No, you go. Oh, Deb, pardon me. Deb, and then Ethan, please. No, that's all right. We're ready. Thank you.
So I think I get at
what you're asking, and I want to try a different explanation. A lot of times, the state legislature will pass a bill that says something like, students are permitted to XYZ, and local boards of education must adopt policies to allow for that. And so that's what these policies are doing. They're allowing for whatever the XYZ is. One example that came up in the last several years was that the legislature decided to allow students to carry around an asthma inhaler. And we did not have a policy for where they could, how they could hold on to that. In fact, we had a policy that said students were not allowed to have medication on their bodies. And so we needed to change our policy to be in compliance with this new law that said that students could carry their own asthma inhalers. So that's the reason why, even though the law has already passed on the state level or on the federal level, we have to adopt a policy, because typically the way the law is written is, this is the law, and boards of education must adopt policies to implement this in their districts. Does that help get at what you were asking?
Yeah, generally it does. I just, there are some other things in this policy, some of these policies that I think are more problematic. I mean, holding an asthma inhaler to me doesn't seem like a problem, but I guess the question becomes like when if you look at something that you truly don't agree with, and then you're being asked to vote on it, but then it's really, it's a state law, it becomes like sort of, murky.
As an individual.
You can abstain or vote against it, right? I mean, at least express your feelings on the issues.
Ethan.
So I guess, just to follow up to the question to Andy, is it possible that there was something more detailed than the minimal, and when they changed the law, that Shipman and Goodwin just made it the minimal? So I'm looking at child sexual abuse. It seems like they've knocked out a lot of people who should be reported. Again, I don't know the law, I don't know. It just struck me as weird that you went from a lot of people being responsible for reporting it to minimal. And maybe it means the same when all is said and done. But my concern is, in keeping up with the federal and the state, we may be changing things inadvertently, and I know you don't.
No, and I appreciate the question. I would just go back to, for example, the reporting and the sexual abuse and such with DCF. We've done extensive, and we have extensive accountability and training with that, as all districts do. And I trust implicitly Shipman and Goodwin as far as interpreting the statute and the requirements and the guidance that they then provide us, that we then hold our school teachers, our administrators, our paras, TAs, bus drivers accountable towards.
Yeah, and my only concern is just in trying to stay current, they may have minimized, and again, I don't know, and it probably didn't happen, but it just was strange that
They haven't cut any corners on it.
It went from a very large thing to a small thing.
Well, they haven't cut any corners on it, and I think it's still the same.
And if I may, with that one, if I think you're referring to the policy that's coming to mind with respect to reporting of child abuse, what the policy is actually saying, well, first of all, we know as mandated reporters, that still stands.
Mhm.
So whenever there is a suspicion of abuse or neglect, as a mandated reporter by law, one is required to report that. However, what the policy is saying when it comes to investigating that matter, that is being led by the police and by DCF. So the policy is not saying, no, you can pick and choose who wants to report. No. Everyone has the obligation to report. But in terms of investigating to substantiate the report, that is being led by the police and by DCF.
Now, this is just the reporting initially. Again, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm assuming they would not minimize it, they would maximize it. It just seemed like everything got cut.
No, I understand what you're saying, but I that's why we have the lawyers, is to make sure that they're interpreting it correctly, and I trust their judgment on that.
No, I'm not doubting that, it just seems strange.
Thank you. Before you go, one thing I wanted to say, Gail, and I appreciate you sharing your piece. I'm hearing some cognitive dissonance going on here, and I appreciate that because, yes, although we are required as a board to uphold these policies. I hear you with like, what if I don't fully believe in it? And I think that's where we have to where we recognize our voice can be heard legislatively speaking, because these policies are in place because of legislation that has required it. And so this is where we can speak to another audience in terms of what our thoughts are about this, and have others to advocate in that regard. And I know that we've had conversations in our policy subcommittee. You've heard me speak many times of something too, where it's like, I don't really quite understand why this is here, but it is what it is for now. But let us not silence ourselves in letting our delegation be aware of the concerns we have, because they can then speak and advocate on our behalf at a platform that can ultimately impact whether or not that remains a requirement or not. Yes, Jason.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I wanted to respond, Ethan, to your concern with this policy. This is a very important policy. And I do recognize, looking at the revisions, there is a lot of markouts. There's a lot of red here. But I think if we pay attention to the language here, we see it actually expands reporting, right? So at that first sentence that's struck out, parents or guardians of students may file a written report, right? But then we look at what was actually added is students or any individuals may make written or verbal reports, right? So it's actually increasing the kind of reporting as well as the individuals who may bring a report forward. Right, so I think in some of it does look kind of daunting with a lot of revision there, but I think it's in advancement of the intent of the policy, right?
And I don't know, just,
Yeah.
I think it was saying, just B was going out on the authority, was still pretty just left out. So, it's so totally, again, I don't know, and I have to go with the answer, we gotta trust the lawyers, but
Yeah.
it's different than what I would have expected. And I don't want to get hung up on the team.
No.
Because I'm way over my head.
No, I think this is important. It says any individual.
I think it basically, A covers B,
Right.
C, and D.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's saying anybody. This, the way it was written, is breaking it down by an adult in
A
the
constituent,
school.
yeah.
Students may make, like each of those individually. Now they're making a blanket statement that students or any individual.
Mm-hmm.
Claire, yes.
And just as someone who's gone through the mandatory training every single fall when we start the school year, it has only increased. The amount of protections, the amount of people that can report, the amount of people who have to get the training has only increased in all the years I've taught. And it was smaller before, so it is growing. I think it's more all-encompassing, so you don't have to spell out everything.
Deb, yes.
This is just a request for a small technical change in 5521 on page 63 of our packet. There's a typo in the word recommendations, so just fix that for the second reading, please. It's in the underlined red.
Midway through the page.
Thank you.
Other thoughts or comments? All right, well, we've had robust discussion. This is important discussion, important matters for a working, breathing, livable documents, that is. So with that, we now will proceed with a vote. And again, seeking, or rather looking for us to vote on the policies that were in discussion. And yes, it is. Thank you so much. I'm just getting blended with this. Thank you, Gail. That's right, a first reading. However, we come together the next time. That will be our second reading, at which time we shall vote. Love the teamwork. Thank you, thank you. And so with that, we are all set. Thank you so much, Anne. Now moving on to...
Do we need to vote or no? Do we vote on the first reading?
No.
Oh, okay. Just a second.
All right, we've shared moments. Yes. All right. Nope, that's all right. And so moving on to staff communications and reports, we now will receive... No, this was a first reading. So I'm not the only one. All right. So this was a first reading, and the next time we'll come together for a second reading, at which time we'll vote. Yes, all right. Now we'll have staff communications and reports, and we'll receive our superintendent's report, please.
All right. I shared with you a little bit earlier that our Next Chapter bookstore students and teachers had a great time participating in the town's Halloween stroll on Saturday, and you saw some of the pictures from that. And as you saw from our last meeting here with the students, I thought it was great and just really showed how fully committed and how much they loved representing their program and their bookstore as they welcomed the kids on Saturday. I'd also draw your attention to the district's website and the first of our videos exploring the vision of the graduate. The vision of the graduate is something that we've presented on and talked about in the past, as it really articulates the school districts and the community's aspirations for students upon graduation. Our goal with the videos is to really provide that through line and to be able to explain to parents and really to students how these outcomes for graduation are developed at the elementary level and at the middle school level. And so our first video showcases Wolcott and Sedgwick students explaining how honor and integrity are integral skills in our district. It's my pleasure to represent West Hartford and accompany Karen Cookish and Susie Sinatro on Thursday and Friday to Washington, D.C. to accept the National Blue Ribbon Award designation from the Department of Education. We're excited to bring this home for the Whiting Lane community. We've also been asked to attend next week, I believe, the State Board of Education's meeting to discuss Whiting Lane's success at the state level. Morley Elementary School's first grade teacher, Leanne Kluskevich, has been selected for the University of Chicago's Outstanding Educator Award. This distinguished award has existed for more than 3 decades, and students accepted into the University of Chicago class of 2026 were asked to nominate an educator whose guidance helped them along the path towards growth. She was nominated by one of her former students, and the entire Morley's community is very proud of her recognition. There'll be an online ceremony next week that will be a presentation that she'll be a part of, as well as Ryan Cleary. And tomorrow night, West Hartford's Community of Concern is hosting a workshop to help teens identify and apply the best tools and tactics to deal with daily pressures from schools and from social lives. The panel includes administrators and counselors from our secondary schools, as well as clinical specialists from the Institute of Living and the Bridge Family Center. The session is from 6:30 to 7:30 at Bristol Middle School's auditorium. There's also a virtual link if people cannot attend in person. And make sure, if you could, to visit your school's website for more information and registration for that workshop. And again, that's hosted by the Hall and the Conard West Hartford Community of Concern group. And that's what I have.
Thank you so much. Teammates, any questions in regard to our superintendent's report? All right, Dr. Murrow, thank you very much. Now moving on to staff reports and board discussions. Advanced placement results. We now will receive Mr. Paul Vicinas and Dr. Michelle Graveline will report. Thank you so much.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you again. Just give me a moment while we cue this up. If you're following along in your book, we're all the way at the end on page 111. And it's a pleasure to be here with my colleague, Dr. Graveline, to talk about our 2022 advanced placement results. So I will jump right in. Quick look at kind of an outline of the presentation. We've been up here before, and we'll talk about our district philosophy, the performance itself. As we always do, we'll take a look at our opportunity and achievement gaps and progress made in that area, which I'll be happy to report on some positive news there, and some recognition and celebration of AP scholars before we open it up for questions and discussion. But we start with really just a picture. Advanced placement and early college opportunities have become a real trademark for the district, and it's really been more than a 10-year journey that we've been on, probably really 15 years, but the data gets crunched up when I show you the slides if I go back more than a certain amount, so you'll see I'm only highlighting some of the pieces. But Dr. Morrow just mentioned the vision of the graduate, and I would want to underscore determination and self-efficacy as one of the components of that vision of the graduate, and I think it aligns to our district philosophy, what we're really after, because our goal in West Hartford has nothing to do with achieving scores or a certain number of tests. It's really about chasing an experience for our students. It's really about providing them with opportunities to stretch themselves, to put the greatest number of students in front of what we consider a very strong and high quality curriculum, to gain the content knowledge and the skills, but also that level of perseverance, that level of stick-to-itness. And there are tons of reports coming out of the College Board that have to do with college persistence and college success based on having an experience in high school, regardless of what score you may have achieved on the AP exam itself. We do recognize, we certainly don't shy from the fact that it is a good metric for our students in terms of their college acceptance. And when we talk with admissions personnel, what they're always telling us is it doesn't matter necessarily the number of APs. It's when they're looking at the courses that you take and the relative strength of your transcript against what the courses that are offered. We do encourage students, and there's been a lot of work with the College Board to make sure that students are acting responsibly when they are taking multiple APs, and we'll talk about that a little bit at the end. But we have a very positive program, obviously, and students have excellent potential for credit, advanced standing, and then flexibility within college programming all by itself. So these are all the components that we're really chasing when we talk about why AP is such a significant part of our district philosophy. So I'll go through and we'll talk through the number of students that participate and the number of exams. And you can see here the historical trend dating all the way back on this graph to 2005. If I go back 1 year further even, it was in 2004 that we had only roughly 600 students that participated in the AP program itself, that took exams, one or more. And it's gone to over a high of 1,200 students was our high number in 2019. Obviously, toward the end of that, you see in 2020 and 21 the impact of the pandemic, decreased number of students who were participating, and you see a strong rebound for 2022. We were up about 100 students from last year, but we're still a little bit shy of the record high. I don't think we'll actually see that. And the contributing factor is the decrease in enrollment that we're also seeing at our high schools as that smaller population kind of trickles through. So we posted a strong number, a respectable number, but I think I came up here for a period of 5 years in a row and we broke record after record, year after year, and I think that might be behind us. Number of exams, similarly you see roughly that doubling of exams from somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,200 to a high of 2,600 3 years ago. You can see that we've rebounded to just over 2,400 exams this year. And our total number of exams for this past year, 2,470 to be exact, represents a 97% rebound from the 3-year average pre-pandemic. Overall, in our program of studies, the courses that students are able to take, we offer 25 different advanced placement courses, and students this year participated in 31 of the available 38, which is interesting. There are more exams taken than courses we offer. Some of that has to do with the fact that some courses like economics, there are actually 2 exams for that, micro and macro. For courses like AP Studio Art, there are potentially 3 different exams that a student can submit work for: 2-dimensional art, 3-dimensional art, or drawing. And then within physics, students will sometimes sit for physics and 1 or more of the Physics C exams, which narrow to specific topics. In general, the average number of exams per student has remained fairly constant over this entire time, this entire journey, and is just slightly more than one. It's about 2.1 exams per student on average, which is lower than probably most people would think. We do have two different ways that we measure, two approaches to measuring participation. This particular metric is something that's useful. It doesn't measure a true participation rate. It gauges the actual number of students participating as a function of the total number 11th and 12th graders in the district. By and large, we discourage 9th graders from taking exams. There are very few exams that 10th graders are necessarily ready for in their progression. However, there are several. We have our 10th graders who participate in AP Biology. Some of them take seminar, and then of course we have some students that are accelerated in their programming and they may take an exam in math or something else. Our participation rate, you again will see relative to the juniors and seniors. We kind of use this as a metric as to what's the saturation of AP testing among our upperclassmen, and we see it was 82.4% this past year. The record high that it was just under 87% back in 2019, signaling the fact that this year we're really back to a more typical participation for AP, which we would expect. The real metric for participation, however, is of course when you take the number of seats in an actual AP class and look at the participation rate, how many kids that were in a seat sat for the exam. And our true participation rate for this past year was at 89.1%. Very strong number. Historically, we've averaged somewhere between 85 and 86%. So we had a lot of confidence among the students. I guess students were ready to get back into taking exams, and we had, and that really shows, I think, the students' feeling of readiness relative to what is put in front of them and teachers. So aside from measuring opportunity, we also measure achievement, and there are two ways that you can measure achievement. The AP Equity and Excellence Rating is the piece that I'll get to, but first I'll talk a little bit about average score. Average score is one way that you can measure achievement, and I'll remind you that AP exams, they're scored on a numerical scale 1 to 5, whole numbers only. No such thing as a score of 2.5, right? So you get a 1, 2, 3, or 5, 3, 4, or 5, and the scores 3, 4, and 5 are typically what most colleges or universities will consider as passing. The average score for this last year was a 3.4. The average score has remained generally flat, and I'll give you some context. Back in 2008, we had only 776 students, just over 1,500 exams. Our average score was a 3.4, and we had 76% of students getting a 3 or above. This year, we exceeded that number of students by 400. We exceeded that number of exams by 900. And we still had an average score of 3.4 and roughly the same percentage of students hitting a 3 or above. That speaks to our philosophy that if we open the doors and provide the opportunity for kids, they will succeed. And so again, we chase the opportunity, not the number. But it's this AP Equity and Excellence Rating that the College Board really chases. They've looked at what we do, and they literally at the College Board talk about West Hartford Public Schools. And they have come up with a metric. I've lost track of exactly when they came to this, but it was within 10 or 12 years. They measure the percentage of the graduating class who has taken an exam and earned a 3 or higher, at least one exam at some point over the course of their high school career, the 4 years generally. This graph reflects, and the answer to my question was on the page, this graph reflects the AP Equity and Excellence Rating since the time that it was first published back in 2005. For this past year, our AP Equity and Excellence Rating was a 61.3. That represents the 4th consecutive year that we have had as a district a score above 60 points, which is please believe me when I tell you, remarkable and looks like no other school district really in the country. I can no longer say last year we had tied, or it was our second highest ever. I can't say that this year, but just 4 consecutive years over 60% is dramatic. And again, that's not just participation in at least one exam, it's passing. So it's really good. Going back to percentages of students who pass, overall the district this year had 74% of students who scored a 3 or above. It is slightly lower than our 5-year average. If I go back a couple of years, those 5-year averages kept going up and up and up each year. Down a little bit for 2022. Not overly concerned about that, if I'm honest. We look at the individual courses and we look at the places where there wasn't as much success in the past. But what we found was last year, Michelle and I were having a conversation. Last year, what we hear from a lot of the teachers was the pacing and everything else was probably the toughest it's been in terms of restarting back to a regular year and getting folks kind of on track. So we anticipate that some of this is our COVID impact. But overall, extremely pleased with our numbers. Just kind of comparing to ourselves in our strongest year ever makes it a little bit of a challenge. Looking more specifically at the individual schools, and you got to read some of those specifics in the report, I would just say that both Conard and Hall regained ground equally in terms of their number of students and the number of exams taken. Hall has made in the last 2-3 years very strong increase in the number of exams, which is evidence of kind of pushing that culture of opening the doors. And that culture has been something that's been observed in the district. It kind of, I think if you roll it back, it started at Conard. And so it really appears to be a point in time where our 2 high schools are operating on a very equal footing with that. And again, both schools posted strong numbers in terms of their equity and excellence ratings overall. Important for us to ensure that this good news and that this philosophy is something that is distributed equitably across all of our student groups. And so the College Board does provide us the opportunity to look back at a 5-year data set. So I've gone back 5 years to 2017 to look at this, and I've used 2010 as a benchmark year when we had some lower enrollment in the program in general, although we were certainly well along our pathway of opening doors more widely. And tried to give a breakdown for our students of color. Again, I'm including our Black, our Hispanic, and our students of 2 or more races into that category in order to get a sufficient end size. Our Asian population, and then comparing to the district as a whole in terms of the all-student group. And you can see when you benchmark against 2010 to 2022 for our students of color, we've more than doubled our participation. With no negative impact and actually a modest increase to our overall average exam score, and a very positive uptick, a gain of 6 points overall in terms of the percentage of students who earned a 3 or above. So that's very good and strong evidence of how, if you close the opportunity gap, the achievement itself will follow, and we're very happy about that. We see for our Asian students, we have more than 1.5 times the enrollment from 2010 to 2022, relatively stable at the 5-year benchmark, really for both groups. And we see that the average score has gone up to a high for our Asian population of 3.4, down a little bit for the average score, but it's that percentage. You had a very strong showing in 2017. I believe that's the high water mark for this particular subgroup at close to 78%. Back down to that 70%, 69% threshold. And we've seen some up and down there. Some of that strength of cohort. It's nothing, if I go back 1 year to 2021, it was a very strong number, so it's not an overall trend for the subgroup. It's just kind of an off year perhaps for this group. But again, overall, these numbers remain positive relative to the fact that we've seen the growth overall as a district, but we've seen generally flat scores when you look at average exam score or percentage earning 3s or above. So the fact that this student of color subgroup has grown in the way that it has is realistically a point of pride for us and demonstrating, impact of the good work that we're doing, with more work always that we need to do until that achievement gap itself is reduced down to negligible points. Finally, just by way of celebration, we look at the AP Scholar reports, the number of students who've been identified for honors based on the number exam performance overall. Two things I mentioned about that whole question of, when is this number of exams too many? The College Board 2 years ago, I believe now, stopped what they considered might be the appearance of incentivizing too many exams. They had two statistics two scholars designations that had previously been used. The state AP Scholar, which I believe was the greatest number of AP exams of any singular student in the state, given to a male and a female. We had won that multiple years in a row. They stopped doing that, and they also stopped doing the National AP Scholar Award, which was similar, for some high water number. I would have to go back and look how many exams itself it was, but it was, a very significant number, and they felt like that could be incentivizing students to overstretch or to overburden themselves, really without necessarily the real gain or the real intent of the philosophy behind opening the door. So these remain the honorary designations that are there, and you see that we have captured quite a few. I'll just make note, the reason there is no research certificates at Hall, it's not because the students didn't earn that designation, but the seminar class did not have a sufficient enrollment in the previous year, which meant that the research class did not conduct either for this year. So that's really a quick summary of the longer written report, and I would happily open it up to your questions and any discussion.
Thank you so much. Questions, comments? Lots of good information shared. Yes, Claire.
I was just curious, some of the large amounts of groups that take a test from one school to the other, like over 70 more students, is that based on course offerings or the teacher, or why would one school have double the number of students taking an exam?
In a singular course, Claire? Yeah. So sometimes that can be, and let's see if I can point to one specifically. Sometimes that can be specific to a particular teacher who might have kind of that cult following. One that jumps out to me is the U.S. government and politics, and I know that there's a strong encouragement at one of our high schools to they pre-schedule that because the American Gov class is a half-year class, and then the AP class is an add-on. Whereas at the second high school, there might be other electives within social studies that are potentially of more interest, in the same way that Hall has the British Lit and some other unique literature courses that have historically drawn away from some of the AP Lit, and in certain years Conard has had stronger numbers there. So sometimes it's a niche course that runs against it, sometimes it's the draw of a teacher. That becomes one of those things where we're saying we want, at the end of the day, we do want to make sure that there aren't any unintended gates that are up. It's been one of the places where we look at AP potential and saying, is there the same level of encouragement for all students to ensure that they land there? But at the end of the day, it's up to the students to elect the courses.
And from these courses, are they all parallel to a college course, so that if you do this, it will equal that college course when you go?
100%. I don't know if, Michelle, if you want to talk about the AP audit process for the curriculum to respond to that. I'm familiar with that.
Yeah, so that's exactly the case, Claire. In order to teach the course, a teacher actually has to go through a process of submitting a curriculum to the College Board, and there are people at the College Board who are reading those and approving them. And usually we have people within the departments that will help colleagues who are teaching the course for the first time to understand that process and to get through that process. But it's actually a learning experience for the teacher in preparation for teaching the course. But that also makes sure that the curriculum aligns not only across the district but across the nation.
Excuse me, other questions or comments? Jason?
Thank you. I actually want to invite the students to reflect on the AP test, or the AP courses at your high school. In particular, I'm just kind of curious how the culture is around the notion that increasing opportunity allows for achievement is a tremendous approach, and I'd like to just know how that is. How do you see that? How are AP courses regarded among your peers? If you could comment on that, I think I'd love to hear what you have to say.
I know that personally, my sophomore year I started out with 1 and now I'm taking 4, so I definitely agree the progression from like freshmen maybe aren't ready to take them, but then through your years you build more confidence and you know that you can do it and you know that you can handle the work. And I definitely think that they challenge you, but they're not unattainable. Like I definitely feel like all of the students who take AP classes can handle the work, and it's not crazy different than like a normal high school class, but you are getting that experience and definitely the confidence aspect. Like throughout the years, as I said, I just feel more comfortable taking them. And going into this year, I was a little scared taking 4, but it's really not an overwhelming amount of work as I thought it would be.
Pretty much the same kind of thing. I did also progress. I started with 2, and then last year I took 3, and this year I'm taking 5. So I've gone through what most of my peers have, and when I say that, I do mean the bubble that I tend to follow through most of my classes. I will say there is a bit of a trend of not knowing, like, not saying like who's going to be in my classes this year, but like which ones, because a lot of people tend to do that. I think the culture around certain AP classes is definitely a little bit, it varies. I would say there are certain courses, especially from what I've seen, AP Economics, at least at Hall, and there's a, you know, a lot of people obviously take that course, as you can see from this statistic. It is a very welcoming course, I believe. I feel like it's one of the ones that a lot of people feel they're not so nervous to take as opposed to something like AP Physics C. So there's definitely some differences there on just like prerequisites and what you've taken, what you're more comfortable with. So I think that's where a lot of the numbers differ. But in general, I would say there is that drive for the students to take a lot of AP classes, which has its positive and its negatives. I can appreciate that there is a change going on in the awards level of trying to push many students to take a lot of AP classes, because I think that is problematic in some ways. But overall, I definitely think that the culture of wanting to take classes that are a bit challenging for you and a bit more difficult than a regular class might be is a really positive one overall. I think also just the fact that a lot of people take it is a little bit more like comforting to me. Like I had a unfortunate scheduling problem this year, and it ended up being moved up to Physics C, which I was not expecting to take, and it was very scary. And it was really reassuring to know that I had a lot of people in my class that were willing to help me. There was a lot of people that are very passionate about the classes that they're taking, and I really am grateful for the fact that that culture is at Hall, because, and I'm sure it's at Conard as well, that like everyone's willing to support you, everyone's willing to be pushing you to help, especially during AP season. Everyone's really like ready to make study groups, ready to help out, because so many people are taking them, which is, it's good to know when you take so many. So that's my piece.
That's tremendous. Thank you. You know, one of the things that we learn by, studying student mental health is that sometimes, performance, high performance does lead to fragility, and so hearing about the supportive structures around those courses, that it's that sometimes those forms of assessment and academic examination can be alienating, in which individuals sort of think of this as their own test score. But I think the culture that you're describing is wonderful. I hope it continues at our schools, and so grateful for the coaching around that structure, and that these do achieve many amazing outcomes for our students.
Other questions or comments? Ethan?
Just one clarification. You guys have mentioned in the past students taking courses at UConn. I assume that's above and beyond this. That's not part of your numbers, or is it?
So great question, Ethan. There is a UConn early college experience where they'll take it actually at Conner Hall, but the curriculum is articulated with the UConn curriculum, similar to what Michelle was describing with the College Board. There are several of our AP courses that are also UConn early college experience courses. So by virtue of taking that, and we talk to our students about that kind of being a dual-edged sword to help them, you can sit for the exam, and that score that you will get on the exam is nationally portable, but it's your performance on a singular given day. Or you sit for the course, and the grade that you earn in the class through the UConn ECE is nationally portable, and it's a reflection of your year-long effort. And so that you can theoretically transfer that credit into a college experience broadly, and either use the ECE or the AP. So it's not every course that has that. In fact, there are many APs that are not articulated with UConn, and there are many courses that are articulated with UConn that are not AP. For instance, I'll just throw one out. We have a couple of math people up here. Discrete math is a great course. Discrete math does not follow that same progression. It's a linear progression to calculus, so it's designed intentionally to be a math class to engage learners who might not be on that progression but still interested in math, need a math, so they can get college credit for that without it being necessarily at that same cognitive rigor as calculus.
Yeah. So some of the numbers are in and some are out. It's a take.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. So,
Gail?
Thank you. Paul, you mentioned something here on the, I guess, the achievement gap analysis on the Asian students here. And I know you said that you felt like maybe that's just a glitch in a year, but you're basically looking at a 5-year span there, right, from 2017 to 22. And there's an 8% drop there. Because we don't really see like every year, I'm just curious, is that something that went down continuously over 5 years?
No, absolutely. That's what I intended by my comment, so I apologize if I wasn't clear on that. It has kind of gone up, gone down, gone up, gone down for the Asian subgroup. We have seen a more consistent incremental closing of the gap for our students of color. And so I know I was, looking at last year's notes as well. And again, that same consistent closing of the gap last year for our students of color. Last year, our Asian subgroup score was high. I don't recall if it was higher than that 2017 mark, but it was right around there. It was either just at it or just below it, like equivalent number. And that's been a piece for that cohort. They seem to have gone up or down, up or down. So I'm not excited about the drop back to the 2010 marker. Not that 70% is a bad figure, but I'm not overly concerned that we're seeing any kind of a trend for that subgroup of students. It's just been without a pattern. So what we do in that case is we dig in a little bit more to the individual courses. In fact, I did for I'm glad now it's coming back to me. There is one particular course, and I'm not recalling what it is off the top of my head, but there is one course that we had a significant percentage of kids in, and the Asian population did not do well on the exam, and interestingly, other students did. So it was just very quirky, because I remember a couple of weeks back when I saw that number, I was like, oh, I need to have some more information on that. So it does appear for this year's data set very quirky, but it was a significant number of kids who just didn't hit the mark where they were highly enrolled in one class.
Okay.
All right.
You have to bear with my voice, sorry. Going back to the achievement gap analysis visual, I was just wondering, I know that this is only the percentage earning 3 or higher, but when we talk about kind of making tests more accessible to students of color or diverse populations, my question is, in terms of the students taking the exam, is that representative of the current demographics of the student population at Hall? Does it represent kind of what the breakdown is, or is it, a smaller percentage of students of color or Asian?
So if I understand your question, Ari, is the number of students that are there, is that reflective, if I have 30% students who are, or Black Hall, do I have 30% of them taking exam? You know what, I should have included that. I've done that in some past years. My historical trend analysis, I don't have specific numbers I can quote you for 2022, but I can get them. But historically, there is, I'll say it's decent. There is some underrepresentation, like we still have more work to do, but it's not a dramatic amount. And it's come up over, and I think that's evidenced simply by when you look at students, because that's a student count. That's not, if I'm a student and I'm taking 4 exams or 5 exams, my name doesn't count more than once.
Right.
So you do see that from, to some degree, so that opportunity all by itself is close, but there's still some gap. We still have some work to do there, and I can get you a more specific answer when I go back to my computer.
Thank you.
Claire, yes. So I understand that these numbers aren't normal within the United States and that they're fairly high, and that making the AP classes more accessible and increasing the students of color taking the AP classes has been a success story. Are there other districts that are trying to do something similar or working towards this? And is there a story, is there any recognition for what we've done? Because this is, the goal is to close the achievement gap, and by the AP results here, you're making a big difference, and some cities and districts are struggling to make an impact.
That's a great question, Claire. I will humbly offer that West Hartford has been the story for a while. There are districts within Connecticut, and we know this, Andy knows this, we talk in, whether it's superintendent circles or curriculum circles, we've kind of sung this song, and there are individuals that are starting. We've had conversations, we've had districts come in and ask us how we did it, what obstacles we faced, and so on. We have been, and I'm sure Julio's behind me somewhere, he's been asked to present through his role with the College Board. He had a position. Tom had been asked to present. Michelle's presented nationally to kind of talk about our story and talk about doing it. There are other districts, certainly nationwide. We're not the only one. We've certainly been a leader in Connecticut, but there are others who are starting to follow suit. And, honestly, I would tell anyone who's listening, it's not hard if you encourage the students and you open the doors. The kids will achieve. Like we've just seen that. We didn't do anything magical other than teach the curriculum and have a belief set in kids. And over the course of multiple years, doubling and more than doubling the number of students in tests, the average score never changed. So that's the biggest thing. We don't want to be the only success story. We're proud that we have such a great success, but this really is a good lesson for folks everywhere.
I would just add, one of the things that Paul alluded to is Julio and I and one of our teachers, Jackie Coricelli, who is now in the role of the computer science curriculum specialist for the district, have presented at College Board, and it's a very supportive community when you go to the conferences, and they want people to tell others their story and learn from each other. So it's a very collaborative type of conference, but Jackie's presented more times than we have, and we're doing great things in that regard, and people are certainly looking to see what we're doing, how we're doing it, and that gives us the opportunity to then say, great, can you keep in touch with us? Because you might be doing it better someday, and we want to make sure that we're benefiting from you as well.
Other questions or comments? One thing I do just want to say, thank you so much again for the presentation, and thinking about the slide you had showing the progression from 2005 till now of the number of students that are now taking the exam. And so certainly, yes, hearing and highlighting how well the students are doing and the growth they've had, but I also recognize the growth that our faculty and staff have had as well, because I recall years ago, and you recall as well, when we were sitting here, hearing how there once was a time where it was a bit more selective and it suggesting who should take the exam. And so it was a concurrent, parallel process of opening it up for the students, but also the faculty and staff being open to that as well. So I thank you for supporting that and encouraging that. And you said many things today, but two things I wrote down as a quote. I'm going to remember this, Paul. You said we chase the opportunity, not the number. And that is so significant. And you also said, if you close the opportunity gap, the achievement will follow. And clearly we're seeing that. So thank you for advocating, for supporting, for encouraging, because we know if our young people feel encouraged, if they feel like the adults believe in them, that will allow them to try something they may not have otherwise tried. So thank you, thank you, thank you. All right. And with that, we shall move on to hear other great things that are happening. We now will hear our Title IX Interscholastic Athletics Self-Assessment. And as we make the transition, we welcome to the table Ms. Ann McKernan and Mr. Jason Siegel, who will report to us. Hello, 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 hello.
Hello, it's good to be with you again.
Good to see you again.
On a new topic. And I have here with me my colleague and friend, Mr. Jason Siegel, our athletic director. And we're pleased to present to you on our Title IX Interscholastic Athletics Self-Assessment that we recently completed. You may remember that this is the 50th year of the anniversary of Title IX's passage in 1972. And last spring, we held quite a celebration at Hall High School, which attracted hundreds of people to come, in which we celebrated 50 years of women's sports, girls' sports in West Hartford. And it was a great night, and we had a lot of great memories and laughter and memorabilia and just a lot of fun. And one of the things that came out of that was that through a few different discussions in town, we realized it might be a good time to take a look closely at our programs to make sure that although we've come so far, are there any hidden differences in our girls and our boys programs? So I spoke to Dr. Morrow about this, and he asked me to lead it, and I spoke to Mr. Siegel about this. And so for the past few months, we have been going through a process where we have been looking as closely as we can to see if we can find any differences in our girls and boys program, and then hopefully rectify those. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Siegel to talk about our process.
Thanks, Ann. Yeah, so in order to find, identify what our areas of strength are and areas of need improvement, we needed to identify what that process is going to be. In the report, you'll see a few different things that we've done throughout the last 2 months. One being holding an open forum for student athletes and coaches via Zoom. Later in the month of September, we held 2 different nights, one night for coaches and one night for student athletes, where basically we shared the process of what we were doing and why we were meeting, and gave them, some topics that we wanted to explore, and then also offer them anything else that we might call a blind spot that we just aren't aware of. And some of those topics included, practice facilities, equipment, uniforms, transportation. We had a great conversation with coaches and a great conversation with our student athletes. We had approximately 35 coaches in attendance and approximately 50 student athletes in attendance. But there's more student athletes, there's more coaches. So to take that a step further, we sent out a survey looking to increase participation and more feedback from our stakeholders. And additionally, what I did was I took a look at our records and our spending habits, and between Hall and Conard, working with my assistants at both schools, just to make sure that there's equitable spending, not only between the boys and girls programs at one school, but across town. So we did a deep dive into that. And then we also, Ann and I, took a tour of both facilities at both Hall and Conard, where we really took a close look at what's out there, and specific things that came from our conversations with our student athletes that we focused on our journey at both Hall and Conard. And it was great to just get out there together and just really see our facilities and what our student athletes and coaches have access to daily.
It was a great sunny afternoon, warm October afternoon, to walk around and look at these beautiful facilities. And it was great to do it after we listened to the students and the coaches, so we had our eye on certain things to keep an eye out. And one of the things, of course, first I'd like to start, one of our findings I think that's really important to emphasize is there was a really great praise for our programming. And I shared a quote that came from Coach Solomon at Hall. He wrote me in an email after the forum to say, I want you to make sure if you're reporting to the board that you tell them the efforts we go to make things even, how cooperative the programs are, how he shared his quote, the boys and girls coaches communicate daily with regard to the special needs and requests, which are always accommodated. At times we mix our practices so boys and girls are interacting and progress towards the same goals. And he just went on and on to praise the programming and how proud being proud of the fact that West Hartford has a large tennis team in this particular case. But overall, the coaches meeting was really interesting because they were quieter than the kids. They found actually fewer areas of improvement, but they gave us a few ideas, which was really helpful. And then the students gave us even more. So we took all that information, we went on our tour, and I want to share with you some areas. Although we have overall really good praise, and at times there were long periods of silence, like anything in equipment, anything in transportation, nothing. And so there sometimes things didn't jump out at kids, but through the whole process, we definitely saw the one area that we need to address is baseball and softball, which I think we knew from previous comments, but to go to the fields, to walk the fields, and to look at the facilities, there is a difference. And some of the differences can be attributed very much to the fact that the boys' youth baseball program also uses Conard's and Hall's fields, and through that process they donate things like sheds that keep the equipment stored, or what we call L screens, or screens at which people pitch behind, or batting screens. People hit into those screens. And so that's one of the reasons, not the only reason, but it's one of the reasons that led to some differences in the boys and girls program. Of course, softball and baseball cannot share the same field, different dimensions, different ball, different configurations. So since they can't share it, they have to have separate. And with the booster clubs and the youth baseball programs contributing to those, and those very welcome contributions, they make some great contributions, it can get uneven in the equipment that we saw. So we would go by the boys field and see 10 L screens and 5 batting nets, and we'd go by the girls and see 1 or 2. They have, as I said, contributed more facilities for storage. They've contributed these, I don't know what you call those, it's like a pop-up batting cage almost, where you can put a shield behind the hitter and it's just a pop, you can move it anywhere, and it's just a great thing to have so you're not chasing the foul balls everywhere. And so there were just a few more amenities, and then some have to do with the configuration of Conard and Hall. Hall is a much larger space. Their field is set far back, and they can put an outfield fence for a home run. Whereas if you did that at Conard, you would lose playing space for a lot of teams. The field hockey team would be impacted. The field hockey team in the fall would be impacted. I think if there was a girls' fence for softball, that field is also a soccer field. So Conard is more compact in its field. Hall's baseball field feels like a little bit of a stadium because of the outfield fence, and it's really set off by itself. Both Conard and Hall boys baseball teams have scoreboards that have existed for many, many years, and neither of the softball teams have those. All Hall's is underway now. So our biggest difference, by far, the only one that was stark, was baseball and softball. And we do believe that is from, the original configurations years ago, putting up scoreboards, the effect of booster clubs, which we honor. We want the parents and people to give to our clubs, but it can throw things out of balance a little bit. And then, so that was the largest finding. For Conard, because they have lesser space, a smaller amount of space, they do send their sub-varsity teams to other sites as well. So Conard softball goes to Sterling Field, so the kids have to ride a bus and come back, just a little extra burden. And I think baseball goes over to Sedgwick to play, where Hall can, with the greater space, can contain everyone. So that's not really an inequity of boys and girls on that, but between the schools a little bit. We also noticed one thing we didn't expect to find, and I should know this because I have 2 swimmers, is I never thought about it, but of course we don't purchase the uniforms for swimming. You buy your own because you're going to keep it, of course. But a girl's swimsuit is $65 to $70, and a boy's swimsuit might be $30 to $40, and we never thought about that, but that was something I think the kids brought to us, is our swimsuits are really expensive and boys are not, so we thought that might be something we should think about. Small things too, we also asked that question. Mr. Siegel's a wrestler by his background, and we thought, well, with the wrestling team, do the boys keep those singlets, let's call them? Am I saying that right?
Yeah, there's singlets that you often see in track and field at the higher levels that runners will wear. Going back a few years, there's now 2-piece uniforms where it's more of a short sleeve compression type shirt with shorts that students may opt to wear instead of the singlet. But currently our system is that we athletics purchase the singlets, and the wrestlers use them and return them at the end of the season.
So we were looking for those kind of differences, and the only one we found it in was swimming, because the gymnasts, they return their uniforms, they wear undergarments, the wrestlers wear undergarments, they return their uniforms. So that was the only other piece we could find there. Someone pointed out, because the way we lay the sports out on the page, it starts always with, they're all labeled boys and then girls, so the boys are always first. So someone pointed out, wow, it kind of looks like we're prioritizing the boys. Should we just maybe put boys and girls at the end and put them in alphabetical order by the name of their sport? We thought, well, that's a small thing, but that might mean something to someone. Both some students and some coaches said, it just, sometimes this isn't an equity issue, but, we wish that the student fan clubs would support the girls as much. I see some nods over here. Maybe all of our students join in, but, they getting the same kind of fan base and support? Certainly not, something that we're funding, but it's worth mentioning to you, since they mentioned it to us, that they would love it if the Blue Rain and the Red Sea were more supportive, outwardly supportive of the girls' events. They did acknowledge when they get to tournaments and when they get to weekend tournament games, they often get good crowds. But they thought it was important to say, as we support our teams in attendance and in through our student groups, they definitely wanted to mention that we should take that into consideration. Those are our major findings that we had found through our study, and I'll turn it over to Justin to talk about how we're going to address some of those things.
Thanks. Obviously, with identifying some areas of needs of improvement, so we need to continue our look at how are we going to and bring things back to equitable standards. One of the things, as you'll see, we're looking to use ESSER funds to look at upgrade options for baseball and softball facilities to make sure there's more equity there between the two, those specific facilities. Taking a deeper look at those outside groups, the friends of groups, the booster club groups, and just to see, what I want to do is have conversations with other districts and see how they structure those programs, look at other models, see if there's any exemplary models out there that we can explore to potentially implement here in West Hartford. Looking at ways to equalize the cost of those swimsuits that we mentioned. Perhaps there's some play in the pay-to-play fee for that specific sport, knowing that there's that yearly extra expense that the families incur, as again, the swimmers and families purchase those swimsuits on their own and they keep them at the end of the season. And then just quite simply just looking at how our sports are listed on the website and just making sure that we're not prioritizing one gender over the other, one group over the other, and I've already been playing around with that and sending it out to different folks to just, hey, take a look at this. How does this look compared to what it was?
I would like to say that as we look at the impact of the outside groups, we will always deliver from the town side, from the school side, we'll always deliver to each sport a very strong program, and we'll always make sure there's equity in between what in baseball and softball what they get. It looks sometimes a little more out of whack when these groups get involved, and that's what Jason might take a look at in other districts and how you might work with these groups, because we want to welcome their support, but we want to make sure that no matter what support they get from outside groups, they get a consistent programming and support from the town, from the school system, so that they can go out and have a great season where they take advantage of everything that's offered to them that sports gives them. So we were really happy, I think, to do the report, to look at it, and although we found a few areas for improvement, I was pleased to hear from so many different people. I thought that we taped the student one because I was going to be late due to another commitment, so I was able to watch it more than once, which was great. I was there live for the adult one. But it was great to hear from everyone and give them the opportunity to speak up. And the kids were really great because they said, I don't really know if this is an equity issue, but we also did hear, our cheerleading's always wondered, people wonder, there was, some cheerleading concerns. It is not an interscholastic activity, but we did listen to our cheerleaders as well. It is a CIAC, more like a activity, not an interscholastic athletic group. But we did hear from our cheerleaders, and one other consistent thing that we don't know how to address is they all need more playing time. They all need more gym time. They all need that, but they do share. It was definitely, there was no concerns about sharing, or the boys get the better gym or the better times, or they travel less, or any of that. There was great cooperation, and I think that's the biggest takeaway I have, because I know we can address everything else. So we open up to your questions.
Thank you so much. Questions or comments with what's been shared? Jason.
Thank you for this report. I was really excited to see this report and having had it done in the district. And I was thinking about it on my drive over to Town Hall today. And I was thinking about something that I don't know if it fits under this umbrella, but esports. I know that we do have that, and it strikes me as possibly something that is co-ed, but wanted to just ask a little bit more about that, if that fits into this equation. And yeah, I'm sorry I didn't get that question out earlier.
No, that's quite all right. Yes. Both Hall and Conard have had esports going on a handful of years now, and starting with this academic year, we've taken them under the umbrella of athletics to support them in their ventures. They are co-ed. There's boys and girls. I'm still really green to esports, but I'm learning. But we are supporting our esports programs under the umbrella of athletics.
Deb.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this report. You had mentioned the softball scoreboard during the report, and I know we had a lot of discussion around that this spring. Can you just give us an update on exactly where we are and what's happening with that? Thanks.
Yeah. As I learned just yesterday morning, the contractor has received all the necessary permits through the building department here in West Hartford. So now it's just coordinating with his schedule to get back on campus and start digging the holes and start getting things up.
I'll just add, I've been in contact with the Hall parents who've been very much behind that effort. And been some delays and bumps and processes, but it is cleared, as Jason said, to move forward, and it's now just on the contractor's schedule, but there's no holdup on the town side any longer. And I believe the steel beams are there.
Yes.
And they're ready to go as soon as the contractor's ready.
Yes, the steel beams are on site. The contractor has possession of the actual scoreboard at their facility. So now that all the necessary permits have been issued, we're just coordinating with the contractor to get it going.
Thank you so much.
Claire, is there anything in this process, if a similar approach was used for Conard, that it could be streamlined at all from some of the groundwork that's been covered, or is it just totally separate?
Yeah, unfortunately, Claire, it'd be great if there was a fast track for school projects, but unfortunately, we have to go through the same process, the same engineering review. Really, what it comes down to with any structure like that really is one of, I believe the holdup was that the town engineering wanted an additional wind study conducted on, what hurricane strength was going to blow it down. We tried to point out, as did the contractor, that they've installed over 300 of these across Connecticut and never has one gone the way of Dorothy. However, that delayed things again. So it's every time we do something that requires permitting or requires any sort of town planning review board, we have to go through that step. And they're fine, and I won't make fun of the town itself. I mean, there's an important way that they're doing this, but unfortunately, there is no way to just say, well, we did it here, we should be able to do it there, because they view it as a completely separate installation.
Other questions? Ethan, you
can go. Okay. Oh, you did? Okay. Question for you. You mentioned the ESSER funds being used for the softball. Is that already assumed, or is that additional to what's already on page, page 156?
You're talking about in the financial report?
Yeah. No, it's just in the existing.
It's in the
It's not meant to be a trick question.
refunds.
Yeah, it was in the ESSER funding that we talked about over at the end of last year.
Okay, so it's already
assumed
captured.
into that. It was already
Okay.
captured into that, yes.
And then you mentioned the swimsuits. So would that be a reduction to the families intentionally of the ESSER?
The goal would be to equalize it to the families, and
Okay.
we'd have to figure out on the back end how we want to do that. We haven't gotten that far yet, but
Okay.
just so that a boy's suit is the same price as a girl's suit, even though they're not.
No, I understand, but the parents
For the parents, it would.
They'd be equal. Okay, I get that. I will say, not relevant to anything, I had 3 great years of wrestling, but I can't imagine any circumstance I'd want to keep the uniform after I was done. It's just my personal, to each their own. But
All right. Other questions? Okay. Thank you so very much. Now moving on to enrollment and class size analysis as of October the 1st, 2022. And as we welcome to the table, Ms. Liz Hewitt. Thank you so much and hello.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, young. Thank you. Good luck on your test.
Good luck.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to share some current year enrollment and class size data with you. I'll provide a brief summary of your report, which begins on page 121 of our book. Just to note, the data in this book is as of October 1st, 2022. That's the official state measurement date. We have completed the state reporting process on a preliminary basis, so there's a chance that the numbers may vary a little bit before we do our final filing. As we look at enrollment overall, we have a total of 9,245 students as of October 1st. Of those, 8,819 are K-12 students. We had actually anticipated a decline in enrollment of 155 students this year compared to last year, but we saw an increase of 32 students over the prior year, so a variance of 187 from projections. We saw the variance across numerous schools, across all grades. And in fact, at the top of page 122, you can actually see the variances by school level. So for example, our elementary was 106 students more than we had anticipated. Our middle school was 54 students more, and our high school was 27 students more than we had anticipated when we presented the long-term enrollment projections to you last January. As we look at, why there's that type of a variance, on an overall basis, it's 2%. It's not a large percentage, but we certainly like to be closer than that if possible. We think it's partially attributable to the pandemic, perhaps some students who were homeschooling or still not in person who came back, but more likely it's a result of the real estate market. As we all know, there's been considerable real estate activity. We've seen homeowners whose students have already graduated from our schools sell and move on, and those homes are being built or bought primarily by families with school-age children. So we've really seen an increase. And as we look at the variance by school, you can see that it's really a factor of where families have purchased new homes, and you'll see cyclical variances at each of the schools as we look school by school. Certainly, we'll use this information to inform our long-term enrollment projections that we will put together for you in January so that we can plan our sections, our number of teachers, our class sizes, etc. But as we look at where we ended up this year, we are quite comfortable that our class sizes were within our guidelines, and we're comfortable with the size of those at all levels. Our average elementary section is currently 18.8 students. You may remember we've intentionally kept our class sizes somewhat small as we are working on learning recovery after the pandemic. We had budgeted in the general fund 203 sections. We actually ended up with 209 elementary sections, so those additional 6 sections are being funded with our ESSER grant as we had planned when we put our proposal together for you. As we look at the middle school, we have average class sizes of 19.3 to 19.9, a level we're quite comfortable with. We look at the high school level, our core academic classes are at 20.5 for Conard and 21 for Hall, while our overall averages are 20.6 and 21.2. Again, class sizes that we're quite comfortable with. And as we look at the distribution amongst the various categories, you'll see we're quite comfortable with where the majority of classes came out. So as I said, based on this information, we feel comfortable with both the number of sections, our staffing levels, and the sizes of our classes. Tables 1 to 8 in the group provide more detailed information, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have on those in particular. As we look through them, you'll see that Table 1 and Table 2 deal really with system-wide data. Table 1 is kind of the standard report that you're used to seeing. It looks at elementary sections by school, and then the numbers in each grade at each of our secondary schools. And then Table 2 really looks at a comparison of our projections versus actuals on both a grade level basis and on a school basis. And as you look at those, you can see that really on a grade basis, almost every grade came in higher than we had anticipated. With the schools, there's a little bit more of a variance there. You'll see that Brayburn had quite an uptick, and a variance of 43 students, or 14.1%, whereas some other schools, for example, Whiting Lane, was down 35 students, or 11%. And as we tried to look at that, there was really nothing unusual about the projections. You know, our long-term projections are typically based upon birth rates, and then it assumes a certain number of families will stay, a certain number will move in, will move out. And so the data that we're looking at is, you know, based on 5-year-old original information. And just based on real estate trends and the turnover of housing, we've seen some variances there. But again, you know, because of the way we budget and because of the way we allocate our resources, we were able to add additional sections where we needed them, take away sections at elementary schools that we didn't need in order to balance them and make sure that all sections were of a reasonable size. As you look at the other tables, Table 3 focuses on our elementary class size comparison. What you see there are the number of sections that fall at each of these sizes. You can see there's a total of 209 sections, with 164 of them being less than or equal to 20 students, and an average of 18.8. As we go on to the other tables, there is a table for each secondary school, each of the 3 middle schools, and each of the high schools, and you can see that they're set up very similarly. It goes by department and grade, looks at our number of sections, our average class size, and then categorizes how many sections are in each of these ranges. It also provides information on our full-time employees for each grade and each subject area. Just of note, as we look at 2021, that was the year that we were in a hybrid mode, so we had some students who were learning remotely and others who are in person. So the figures noted here are the in-person, so that's why you see a variance with some of those. So certainly I know you had a chance to look at this previously, so I won't go through each page with you, but I am happy to answer any questions you may have, either on an overall basis or on anything specific as it relates to our sections and our enrollment levels.
Thank you so much, Liz. Questions or comments? Gail?
So I was just curious, I mean, 2.2%, I don't know, it's not that big of a number, but it's not that small of a number either, and it's approximately 187 students. How does that impact on the budget, and how do you make those adjustments, if you make any?
So normally, you know, when you look that we have 209 elementary sections and 106 additional elementary students than we had planned on, that means that each of those has, you know, about 0.5 additional student. So we really are able to absorb that within our, you know, existing sections and with our additional existing staffing. Where we run into problems is if there are big swings between schools. But we're able to reallocate resources. So for example, at Whiting Lane, we only needed 2 sections of kindergarten this year where we had anticipated 3. So we were able to move that teacher to another school that needed another section. So with that flexibility, it really is a limited impact on us.
Okay, so that's my question. So it's really a limited impact. And what about if the percentage of those students, 187 students, might be, you know, special needs and things like that? Does that begin to impact the budget or not really? You can absorb that as well.
We certainly, you know, we have a set budget, and so we make sure that we're able to allocate our resources accordingly to meet the needs of those students. But certainly as we see a higher level or higher percentage of special education students, that does have a significant impact on the budget.
I guess my question is, are you saying though that it really had no impact this year? We were able to absorb both the special needs and the regular students?
We were. And, part of the reason that we're able to do that is that we're still utilizing ESSER funds specifically to meet additional needs that we have for learning recovery. Are you okay?
I'm gonna make it, Liz.
Okay.
You're doing great.
Hate to say I continued to talk while I saw you fall on the, okay, carry on, all right.
It's a great team we got here. Sorry, I'm trying to get the cough drop here.
So we will be able to manage within that. Certainly, anytime there's a significant variance, it does put pressure on our resources, and so we're forced to really look at our priorities and make sure our resources are allocated properly. All right, now that Andy's going to make it.
Well, Annie, I was going to say, I have you covered if need be, a bag of cough drops. Claire, yes.
Yes, so with the ESSER funds, we were able to reduce class size.
We were.
And it makes all the difference in the world for a teacher, especially when you have some impacted kids, maybe some more mental issues that you have to address, some more needs of the kids. But and I see the sections in 22, 23, there were many zeros in the class size of 24 to 28. I'm assuming that's going to start coming back down. Will we see that next year? Will we have to go to more increased class size next year, or do we still have another buffer year? And then as well, with this increase in students, some of the sections in schools where, like Duffy typically would have 4 classes per grade level. They've got 2 5s in your K and 1. Some of these other bumps of these grades will keep moving in. Are there the facilities in all our schools? I know that they talked about extra space in a report that was almost a year ago.
Yes.
But are we at all concerned about this bump and having enough room in some of the schools?
So the first question had to do with class sizes and whether we'll see those increase over the next year. We do still have an additional year of ESSER funding, and part of those funds are allocated to make sure that our class sizes are still reasonable. However, as we've programmed those funds, we have always assumed that we would be kind of in a step-down model so that we don't have a cliff at the end of these funds. And so what our plan had been, and we'll see how the numbers work out, but the current year we're using funding for 6 or 7 positions. We would want to step that down by at least 3 or 4 so that then the next year we could step down again. So we will see increases, but I have every confidence that we will stay within guidelines. Our current guidelines are 23 students for K to 3, except at our magnet schools where it's 21, and then higher for our 4th and 5th grade. So I have no doubt that we'll be able to stay within those, but I think just because of budgetary pressures as well as other needs, we will need to tighten that up a little bit in the upcoming year. As it relates to size or facility room, certainly we've been at a much higher enrollment level in the past. With similar facilities, we have eliminated some modular classrooms over the years, but we've been able to fit all of our students in with our specials. And so you use Duffy as an example. We were able to reprogram some space at Duffy this year to make sure that we had enough room for the grades that had 5 sections. And so I feel confident that we do have enough room, but we will have some pressures at a couple of schools. In particular, Wolcott School will see some pressure. And so we're looking at that right now to see if perhaps we need to do something there. Wolcott is a school that did have 4 portables that had really reached the end of their useful life, and we had to take those down.
Decommissioned.
They're decommissioned, there we go, that's a nice word to say it. They needed to be decommissioned, and based on our enrollment at Wolcott, we were really able to fit within the existing footprint. However, now that we're receiving some pressure there with enrollment, that will be a school we'll have to look at. Most other schools, I think, will be okay.
Claire, that's a really good question. Just to add a little bit more, one of the things that we're running into at Wolcott is the accessibility of some of the space that we're now using and making sure that every student has the ability to access that space. And so we're looking with Bob Palmer, we're talking about some different options there. And that's one of the ones that we're going to have to do some more thinking about and some problem solving on. One of the things that I think really helps us with this is that, 2.2%, that's about average, I would say, where we normally hit as far as variances. It's not an exact science because we don't really have, as Liz said, we don't have all of the information. We don't have control over the real estate, the move-ins, the apartments, and so forth. We don't have control over who's deciding to go to private schools, to magnet schools, all of these other approaches that we see during the summer. But what we do is almost on a daily basis, it seems, over the summer is working with residency, trying to get that idea of where our splits are going to be, where we're seeing more pressures, where we can make some choices. Do we take away a kindergarten space at Whiting Lane, knowing that we're not going to see those numbers? We're pretty confident about that. And do we add that to the fourth grade, where we know we're going to be able to see those numbers and split it there? Because what we never want to do is be in a position where the week before school, we're splitting classes, we're adding teachers. That's just never a good place to be. What helps us this year is we're getting better data working with the town, working with all of the various new apartment complexes and condos that are being built. And so we're getting some better data on that and forecasting how that's going to impact going forward as well.
In fact, we'll be using a new module. I don't know if I talked about this already. That's part of our Power School platform. It's called Predictive Enrollment Analysis, and so we're utilizing that. It really leverages the information that we already have in Power School to create long-term projections. And one of the things that they do is that I've worked with Todd Dumais, who's our town planner. He's given us information on all the developments in town, when they're expected to be completed, at various stages, and then Power School is actually able to use certain factors. They assume a certain number of students per type of domicile, and we're able to inform our long-term projections with that information as well. So that'll be coming out over the next couple of months, and I'll be able to share that with you, I hope, in January.
Other questions, comments? All right. Okay. Thank you so very much, but you're not going anywhere.
I'm not.
Because we now are getting ready to receive our financial report. We're on to Routine Matters Financial Report. And we'll pass it to Deb, who will update us, please, for the last time.
Good evening, everybody. This is the financial report for the period ending September 30, 2022. So our first financial report of this fiscal year and of our school year. And there aren't a lot of surprises here because we haven't had the time to accumulate a lot of surprises, which was a good thing. So if you turn to page 135, the general fund report, you'll see at the bottom that we are expected to end the year at this time within our available appropriations. We have a couple of variances, some saved money under salaries. Some of that is due to hiring new teachers in at lower steps than teachers who had left. But the vast majority of it, unfortunately, is due to some vacancies in our teacher assistants positions, which that's not the kind of savings that we actually want. You'll see that that's reflected under all other purchase services, where we are now spending more money to hire these teacher assistants through contracted services, through a service, as opposed to hiring them on our own. So it's a goal to hire more teacher assistants right through the district and balance this back out again. Moving over to the state and federal grants fund report. It's nice and color coded this time, so thank you to Liz for helping us out with that. The grants above the line, which are coded in green, are the current year grants, and you'll see that we are expected to fully expend all of those grants. Below the line, you'll see those are multiple year grants where we are in year 2. There are a couple of items of note. ESSER 2, which is in the pink, 502162 is the code on that. We are expected to fully expend the rest of our ESSER 2 grant before its expiration date, which is September 30th of 2023. Right, I had put that the wrong way, sorry about that. And so that will be fully expended. The ESSER 3 grant, we get an extra year, so you'll see that we're only expected to expend part of that grant this year, and we'll fully expend that before the time runs out on ESSER 3. There are a couple of grants at the bottom which did expire on September 30th, 2022. Those are the non-public grants that we had talked about in prior reports, where we will return those funds to the state because the private schools were not able to utilize those funds. So in total, we have grants of just under $17 million and good plans to use all of those grants this year or to carry forward some of them as allowable into future years. Moving on to special program funds reports. The only line item here that we've actually really expended so far as of 9/30 is the summer school line item, because that happened, as you might suspect, in the summer. And this is still an estimate, this figure, because we have just still a few more bills to straighten out on that one. So that's going to have another look probably next month. As a reminder, though, this special programs fund is viewed in totality. So any variance in one line item is often offset by variances in other line items, and so not to worry about that. And finally, moving on to Nutrition Services Fund. This fund is very healthy at this time, with a very good fund balance of a little over $2.5 million. Just as a reminder, we're providing meals for free to all students through winter break. And then when students come back in January, that's when we'll start charging for meals. We are going to start sending out notifications to families about mid-November probably, to remind them to apply for free and reduced lunch. So many students will be able to continue to have lunch for free or at a greatly reduced rate moving forward even after December. Just to call out to our daily average student meals, 4,501 meals on average per day being served by our district. That works out to just over about half the students who are purchasing or getting a free lunch each day. The rest, I presume, are bringing from home. And also, as a reminder, there's going to be some additional equipment purchases with some of the extra funds available under Nutrition Services to help us provide healthy meals in a more efficient way across all of our cafeterias for our students. And that is the financial report for the period ending September 30th. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you so much, Deb. Any questions or comments regarding the financial report we just received? Claire?
I don't know if you have the answer, but I'm just curious, is that 4,297 a typical number, say, from like 3 years ago or 4 years ago?
It's not. I'm sorry, it's not. It's considerably higher than we had in the past. Our ability to serve meals free of charge has really been a benefit to our students, and we're happy that they've taken advantage of that. I don't have the figure handy for what it would be. The last true comparable year would be the fall of 2019. And I'm sorry, I don't have that on hand, but I recall it was around 3,000.
Yeah, if I remember it, Claire, it's always been around a third of our students wind up going ahead and were purchasing lunches back then.
Mm-hmm. So is there a grace, or what does the district do in January when these families, so if it's typically a third and a half of our kids are eating, they will not qualify. And so this extra expense is going to hit some families who are not looking at the flyers that come home. So what happens? They're still fed, but how do you handle when the kids cannot pay? And how apparent is it in the lunch line that they do not have funds?
So it's not apparent in the lunch line at all. We serve the same meal. So it's not that a student who does not have money on their account receives some sort of different lunch that would identify them as not having enough money to pay for lunch. So that's not a concern. We really will be putting out a very active notification plan. We're notifying families 30 days prior to when this SMART grant ends, when meals for all students will no longer be free. Also, many of our families are qualified for free or reduced lunch through direct certification. They don't all have to apply. But we are every month reminding them, and I've seen it in many school newsletters, with a link to go to the application, reminding them to apply, so that if perhaps they don't qualify under direct certification, they're still getting that information to us so that they'll be ready to go. There's also a grace period when you file an application, and so if you filed an application but it hasn't been ruled on, there's a grace period that we give until we make a determination. So I feel confident that we'll be able to meet the needs of our students and help our families transition back to a paid service.
Other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, seeking a motion that the Board of Education approve the financial report for the period ending September 30th, 2022.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Ethan. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Deb. Any discussion? All of those in favor, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you so much, Liz. Thank you. Now moving on to approval of the minutes, seeking a motion to approve that the Board of Education approve the minutes of the regular Board of Education meeting of October the 19th, 2022.
Moved. So moved.
Seconded.
Thank you, Ari. Is there a second? Jason seconded. All right, thank you. Any discussion? All of those in favor say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. Thank you. Now moving on to information and reports. We now will receive a superintendent search update. So we certainly know that we are in a period of soon-to-be transition as we are in the process of seeking a new superintendent. We adore the one that we have at this time, and we know that we are looking to have someone on a more permanent basis. We know that we are partnering with CES. We're very thankful for that partnership. They're doing the heavy lifting of this process. We can say that we are glad that as of last week, officially a job posting has been disseminated to the general public in a wide brush way. Not only has the outreach gone to specific platforms, but also to all of those who are 093 certified throughout the country. So we certainly are reaching out far and wide, and we are looking to see what we may receive in return. The end date for when the applications are due, I believe is December the 1st. So the applications will be reviewed on a rolling basis up until that point in time. However, come December 1st, thereafter, applications will not be received. And so with CES and their leadership, they're going to review the initial applications, and then our Personnel Search Committee will then review as well, and we will take things from there. Now, as we know, when it comes to looking for a superintendent, it's not just done here. We certainly do want community engagement. So you will be hearing very soon of opportunities to share your thoughts and your suggestions in terms of what you are looking for from a superintendent. We collectively have responded and shared our thoughts, but we also want to hear from the community as well under the leadership of CES. So more to come. But again, the first big step is that the job posting has gone out as of last week, and we are looking for those who are interested to please submit your resumes so we can see where things may go. And with that, we now will move on to other information and discussions. Do we have any other updates from board members here?
This is me.
Yes, this is you.
So this is, I guess, when I say I have officially submitted a letter of resignation to our town clerk from the Board of Education that will be effective on November 8th. And so I think a copy of that will be sent to you, Madam Chair. Can I take a moment?
Absolutely.
Okay. I also want to say our schools win lots of state and national awards at all levels, for music and history, art and computer science and AP scores and sports. The list just goes on and on. In order to keep our schools performing at this high level, it takes the dedication of our team of educators and the attention of our community, represented by the Board of Education and supported by our colleagues on the Town Council. So I want to take a few moments to thank all of the current and past board members with whom I've been fortunate enough to serve and to partner. And here we go. They are Cheryl Greenberg, Carol Blanks, Dave Palyuk, Sean Payson, Amanda Aronson, Ari Steinberg, Jason Chang, Claire Nazarella, Rob Levine, Mark Zdanowitz, Liz Wilcox, Gail Harris, Ethan Goldman, and of course, Lorna Thomas Farquharson, as well as to thank all of the West Hartford Public Schools teachers, staff, and administrators. Serving our community on the Board of Education has been a true honor over the past 5 years, and I look forward to seeing the excellence of our schools continue in the years to come.
Thank you, Deb. And so, with hearing your words, we have words to share with you as well. And pardon for not giving the heads up. I'll just go in alphabetical order if there's no objection to that. So, beginning with Jason.
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity to allow me to wish you good luck on this next step, this next chapter, and thank you for the support you've given me and all of the learning opportunities I've had to see, to be introduced to the board and witnessing your leadership during the pandemic, which was a tremendous feat, and so really grateful for having served with you on the board, and wish you the best of luck.
Ethan.
Sorry to see you go. I really enjoyed working with you and appreciate all the help on the Finance Committee, since you always seem to have the answers. And it was good experience. And I wish you well on the new change, and I think it's our loss, but it'll be their gain. So thank you for all your help.
Gail.
So I want to echo, I'm really sad to see you go. I always feel like you're totally a voice of reason and totally approachable, and I've really enjoyed serving with you, and I feel like it's a loss to our board. But I know you're going on to something more exciting, and I wish you a lot of luck there, and it's been a pleasure serving with you.
Claire.
So I'll never forget that phone call I received at school saying, if you're interested, you need a resume and a letter today. And Deb convinced me to put my hat in and helped me along the way, met with me, and gave me some great guidance. I've never met anyone that researches and reads as much as you do. This woman knows how to cover everything, so she always was on top of stuff, filled us in on stuff that we hadn't seen. So I'll miss that. I'm very happy that you're reaching the goal of going to the town council for the next step, and I'll miss working with you.
Ari.
I have no voice. I'll try my best. I think I feel really lucky that we were friends first and then board colleagues second. So I expect our friendship to continue even if we're not serving on the board together. You must be the Board of Ed recruiter, though, because I actually was going to say the same thing, that, but flip it, because Deb and I were friends before, when an opening on the board came about, she was the first person that I reached out to and called and said, what is this really about? What is this going to be like? And what I really respect is you were super upfront and honest with me about what this position would look like pre-COVID. I don't think any of us could have anticipated what this would look like during and post-COVID. But I'm really excited for you. I think the town council is lucky to have you. I'm really sad that you'll be leaving the board, but you've been such a strong support and member of this team that I feel like even though you're kind of going to be on the town council, that you will still be kind of a part of the board.
And so, Deb. I'm not going to get choked up. So, it has been a pleasure working with you. I didn't have the pleasure of knowing you prior to serving on the board. And for those who don't know, Deb and I started together 5 years ago. And I have to say, even though then I didn't know you, I feel like, oh boy, we've had time to get to know one another, whether it be on the board or even off of the board. And I have to say that I very much appreciate and respect you as an individual. I respect the fact that your servant leadership predates when you became a board member, because you certainly have been a part of the community, advocating, speaking for others, speaking up for others, long before you sat here at this table. And I think that says a lot about an individual, that the voice that they speak on is one not just on the clock, off the clock, but it's one that is around the clock. So I appreciate that about you and respect that about you. And I respect the tenacious way in which you will speak your mind. And that is one where I do the same as well. And it's almost like sibling rivalry at times where, yes, you speak your mind, I speak my mind, but in the end, knowing that we share the incentive and the desire of speaking for those who may not have an opportunity to speak, and speaking and serving for those young people and those families in our community. And that is something that, although you will no longer be sitting at this table, knowing that your voice of reason and advocacy will continue at this table, that is, but under a different premise, is something that will not be saying goodbye, just saying see you later. Now, something I am going to miss, but actually in a different way. Some of you don't know that Deb and I have a shared fondness of music and of dancing. And so that is something that I look forward to happening in other capacities. So not going to say goodbye, going to say see you later. Bless you, wish you well. It's been an honor serving with you.
Thank you.
And so with that, we certainly want to acknowledge how much you mean to us in a small way, a small token. One way we know that any person that has had the honor of serving on the board, when their time has come to a close, they receive a commemorative chair. And so right over there is something that resembles what you will receive. You will receive a chair that will be engraved with your name, and that is soon coming, and certainly well deserved. And we also have a gift for you here. And this is from all of us here at the board, and there's a card right there that shares our words of gratitude to you.
Thank you
And here
so
you
much.
are. You are welcome. And also want to say that all of us, we know that you love the color purple. So all of us wore purple in some shape, form, or fashion. I brought a purple scarf for you just to resemble the moment as well. But that is for you, just a small token of our appreciation to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Welcome. So with that, please let's give Deb a round of applause for her service. And with that, we now will move on to future business. Announcement of future meeting dates. Our next meeting will be on Tuesday, November the 15th, 2022, here in room 314 at 7 p.m., followed by Tuesday, December the 6th, 2022, again here in room 314 at 7 p.m., and then Tuesday, December 20th, my December, room 314 at 7 p.m. Do we have a request for any future agenda items? Hearing none, do we have any visitors here who would like to make a comment? And seeing none, we do not have an executive session, so at this time, seeking a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you, Deb. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ethan. Meeting adjourned at 9:45.
7.